for not having a view such as Newton, or for that matter, Descartes would have had, and that's what I want to deny. Thanks for your time.
All right, we'll press to the next question.
Okay, my name is Anja Jawanek. I'm from Notre Dame. I'm trying to wrap my mind around, so this is a problem for Leibniz really, but so I'm trying to wrap my mind about around the solution, what it means for everyone to be saved. So there are some counterfactuals there, and that's always difficult, especially at the end of a conference. But so the story was that wanting everyone to be saved is to want to give and actually give everyone sufficient grace, where that meant I have sufficient grace if and only if I wanted to be saved, then I would be. Okay, but suppose I'm one of these people, unfortunately, who is damned. Then it's actually impossible for me to want to be saved. So, think of the analogous counterfactuals in the compatibilist case that we all know. What does it mean that I could have done otherwise? Well, if I had chosen otherwise, then I would have. But, rejoinder, I couldn't have chosen otherwise, therefore I couldn't really have done otherwise. So run that same with respect to our problem. If I'm damned, I couldn't have wanted to be saved. So therefore, I couldn't have had, and I didn't have, saving grace. So I wonder how God could want me and actually give me saving grace if, in fact, it turns out to be impossible for me to have that.
Oh, that's Pascal's objection to the notion of sufficient grace. That,
oh, okay, good. I'm in good company.
He says that. Talking about Thomists and the Auxilius controversy, he says, well, the sufficient grace and in the end is insufficient in some way. Well, I think that in some way, well, Leibniz, well, this is the discussion about if freedom requires the possibility of doing otherwise, and that possibility, if that possibility is a mere possible option in other possible world of a counterpart of mine, or is a real option for me. That's the problem I see. I think that in some way Leibniz is in the tradition of some early 17th century thinkers that stated that God can give you a sufficient grace that is sufficient to make a good action, but not in sensu composito, but in sensu diviso. Yeah, this is a scholastical distinction that ultimately means that you don't have the actual power to make that good action, as I see it. So I think that's a problem, as I see it, and I am going to say something that maybe is a bit controversial. When Leibniz rejects Molinism and well, indifferent will of Molinism, he's also unwillingly rejecting the possibility of a real self-determination of the will, that not only in the sense of spontaneity, that is the sense in which he endorses self-determination in some way. So I think that, well, he's rejecting the possibility of the created will of really determining itself and not be determined by its perceptions, the series of its perceptions. So as I see it, I see the problem, and I think that, well, this is the best way in which Leibniz could solve the universal salvific will. But of course, I'm not satisfied by that. Okay.
My name's Sean Greenberg. It's become something of a received view, albeit one that I think is rarely argued for, that the scientific revolution generated some new problem of freedom, that science itself generated some problems. Now, Ursula listed a number of thinkers, but let's just leave them all aside. We'd probably have to go through each one. Let's just talk about Leibniz. Can you guys point me, I don't know of texts, can you point me to texts where Leibniz explicitly cites science as generating a problem of freedom for him?
Well,
explicitly cites science.
Yeah, since I said that, agreeing with Ursula, perhaps she can answer better than I.
If you go to the early writings of Leibniz, when he talks about mechanical philosophy, and he has Hobbes in mind at that time, he definitely says so. Right, you could, but that is particularly meant in terms of atomism in a way, right? Because then all the bodies could come together because it doesn't matter which atoms. Right, but you know, what he says, it's a threat. If that is taken serious, that that the soul cannot have freedom. And that is the threat which comes from Descartes and the denial from final causes. And nevertheless, what is absolutely I wouldn't come up with anything in particular at the moment which would say that science makes it impossible to have freedom. And he wouldn't say that in public anyway, I'm sure. But what is in the back of this whole discussion is indeed that a whole relation of body and soul. If the body cannot be influenced by the soul, how would you ever direct your body to do actions? And this is so familiar to all the thousands of years before that this is an easy thing to do. But with the principle of inertia, it really becomes a problem. And then you have to explain how it happens. And that is why we have these long discussions about influxus physicus throughout the 18th century and late 17th century.
Okay, I think this is going to unfortunately have to be our final question since we're...
Well, just a short remark, very short, because I really appreciate that. I'm Paul Rateau from University of Paris. I really appreciate your paper. Just a remark on the distinction between antecedent and consequent wills, of course. I just wanted to say that, as you may know, it is introduced by Leibniz very later in his writings. Yeah. And in early writings, he rejects it. In the omnipotence of God and in confessional philosophy, he rejects the distinction of antecedent and consequent wills in God. And what is it very interesting, I think, for you is that he introduces this classical distinction, particularly in the context of the discussion of predestination during the Iranical negotiation in Berlin with Jablonski, Spanheim and others, Molanos. And so what is interesting that it used in order to answer to particularist theologian. And then when he's going to write Theodicy, he extends the use of distinction in order to explain the metaphysical explanation of creation of the world. That is very interesting. From the particular case of predestination, he used the model, he used it to explain all the world, and so that the question of predestination is a particular case in the whole explanation of the creation.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting.
Thank you very much. If you see, I say in the paper, but I didn't read, that Leibniz introduces this distinction, particularly when commenting Burnet's exposition of the 39 Articles of the Church of England in order to make place for Arminianism. That's a particular form of Protestant theology, which holds a very libertarian position on predestination and grace and so on. And I agree, but in that writing that I think is from the beginning of the 18th century, 1701 or 17, he already makes this extended interpretation of antecedent and consequent will, which is very interesting. Thank you.
Let's thank both of our speakers.